It speaks. The president a long time ago, George W. Bush, breaks his promise about his successor deserving his silence. On Obama's reforms, quote, there are a lot of ways to remedy the situation without nationalizing health care. On Obama's carrying out of Bush's own hope to close Gitmo, therapy isn't going to cause terrorists to change their mind, and he prefers persuasion. Still crazy after all these years. He kept us safe. George W. Bush himself said that last night about himself at a paid appearance, during which he also finally tried to explain the My Pet Goat fiasco, and during which he was hard-pressed to live up to his vow that his successor in the Oval Office deserved his silence. So hard-pressed as it proved that he stopped living up to it. W. No like. Next. Former President Bush last night tiptoed toward criticizing President Obama, but went even further in blasting the policies of former President Bush. Our fourth story tonight, forging an honorable Bush legacy by standing against everything he once stood for. Speaking at Erie, Pennsylvania for an undisclosed amount. What a great place to start this tour. Mr. Bush answered questions submitted beforehand. The sponsor, the Manufacturers and Business Association, applauding loudly. No one apparently submitted a question asking why Mr. Bush had devastated manufacturing and business. Asked what he wanted his legacy to be, Mr. Bush replied, quote, he protected the country, without explaining how such a legacy might accrue to a president on whose watch the nation suffered its worst domestic attack ever. Mr. Bush, according to the Washington Times, instead explained his last night that on that day, quote, I realized that we were in crisis, and the first thing I do in any crisis is calm. If you're president and all of a sudden the whole world is watching you and you get up and do something precipitously, frightened children storm out, that kind of movement will cascade through a society. 8 years later, Mr. Bush still having not explained why the sight of him getting up and walking, rather than, say, storming out of a room, might frighten anyone, and apparently unaware, even last night, that the frantic movement of everyone in Lower Manhattan running for their lives was already cascading through society that September morning. On closing Gitmo, quote, therapy isn't going to cause terrorists to change their mind. A, not everyone in Gitmo is a terrorist. B, Mr. Bush himself said he wanted to close Gitmo. Most amusingly, C, it was Mr. Bush who first sent Gitmo detainees to, yes, the Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Nayef Center for Care and Counseling. And D, the Carnegie Endowment found that care and counseling center got 1,400 prisoners to renounce violence. On the economy, I know it's going to be the private sector that leads this country out of the current economic times, yet, quote, I firmly believe it was necessary to put money in our banks. On health care, I worry about encouraging the government to replace the private sector. Plus, you can spend your money better than the government can spend your money. He then left on roads paved with government money, with Secret Service agents paid with government money, covered in case of an accident by their respective government health care plans. Let's bring in Chris Hayes, the Washington editor of The Nation magazine, which, despite the title, is not paid for by your tax dollars. Great, thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you, Keith.
In this man's defense, has he painted himself into a corner to some degree, saying he would not openly criticize Obama while still wanting to defend his own policies, especially because so much of Mr. Obama's presidency is, in fact, fixing those Bush policy mistakes?
Yeah, right. I think it's natural to want to defend oneself. And I actually think this entire convention, that somehow it's unstatesmanlike or violating some, inviolable taboo for an ex-president to speak ill of the current president is kind of silly. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're private citizens. If they have something to say, say it. I mean, I really would have liked if, say, President Bill Clinton had very vociferously used his political capital to oppose the Iraq War. He didn't do it, So I'm not quite sure where this norm comes from, but I think it's kind of a dumb one anyway.
Yeah, Theodore Roosevelt certainly didn't adhere to it in
that's right.
1912, 1916, or 1920, come to think of it, or any of those years. Describe for me a world in which history teachers tell their students just this. Not that it's even mixed or that there was, a strong response, but just this, that President Bush's legacy is he protected the country. Do you just skip 9/11 in that sort of construction, in that sort of educational system?
Yeah, I guess so. It's the weirdest thing that this is the legacy that they're so focused on, when it is just an objective, empirical fact that no president has seen more civilian deaths from a terrorist attack and terrorist attacks than George W. Bush. I mean, so it's just unclear how that could possibly be, what they want to hang their presidency on. And clearly that's, they've retreated back. I mean, I think they basically, to be honest, conceded everything else, right? I mean, basically the argument is we basically screwed up every single thing, but at least there wasn't another attack. But there was the first one, and there was also, almost $2 trillion lit on fire in Iraq in the bailout, and also 4,500 Americans dead in Iraq, not to count the hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and tens of thousands of Afghanis. That's quite a toll to be hanging your legacy on.
One assumes they thought they were going to get some sort of positive thing to append to the end of that sentence. Right. I mean, we mentioned the other Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt, if he'd left office on December 8th, 1941, would have been remembered as the president who did a nice job on the economy after the Depression.
Right.
But guess what? Pearl Harbor, but then he did stay and fought nearly the entirety of the Second World War. And people don't look back on Pearl Harbor as having defined it because there was something compensatory historically after
thank goodness that we have term limits, so we're not in that situation again.
And still he receives and deserves criticism about Pearl Harbor. This other point. What does it say that Americans went from favoring the Bush economic philosophy, such as it was, to this new NBC poll from yesterday that shows that Americans favor a public option as a health care choice, and 2/3 nearly are okay with taxing the rich to get the public option?
What it shows is that policies and governance matter. This is something that a very good blogger named Matt Iglesias has been hitting home on his blog a lot recently. It's that you can't separate politics from the actual real-world outcomes that those politics produce. And so back when everyone thought that the Republicans were going to have a permanent governing majority, everyone just thought that they could use their political mojo and magic, and the fact that they were objectively driving the country in the ditch wouldn't matter. It does matter.
As Robert Gibbs said today, responding to all this, we had that debate, we kept score last November, and we won.
Right.
The Washington editor of The Nation magazine, Chris Hayes, still operating independently of taxpayer funds. Thank you, Chris.
You got it. Thanks, Keith.